Good morning, Ayin Beis, volume 3, page 1471. Okay. So what we learned is the new paragraph in the second half of the page about Atahu Achale Nivra Elam, Atu Misha Nivra Elam. That you are that one before the world was created and the same one after the world was created, meaning that even the level of Ata Machayas Kula, Malchus, even as Malchus comes down to the lowest levels, does not experience any change. The creation process did not create any change because it was all in a reflection of the divine. It was not in the divine etzem. And as such, no change. So even the Isis Hadibur, even the lowest levels of Asiya, Malchus of Asiya, Blishin Klal Mekedem Abriya, the Achar Abriya. Because it's not hislapshus of tfisa mamish like the neshama in a guf. It's not quite like that. So yesterday I was wondering what that meant, but I think we got it clear that even in Elam Hazeh, it's Ein Arech Lecha. God is removed, meaning he's not affected. But I happened to look in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer that this is based on, and I just want to read it inside if you don't mind, because he brings that language as well and says a few more words, which may be helpful before I continue this summary here. Give me a moment, I'm finding it right now. Mittler Rebbe. Okay. From the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, I believe it's page 387. Let me see. 1 minute. Yeah. No, earlier, sorry. Yeah, I think it's page 379. So let me look at the exact language. No, even earlier, sorry. I'm looking at page 377 from the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, and he says like this. Okay, Ato, Eina Rech Lecha Afilu Be'amal Shuhu Yeah, says it very clearly that how we interpret is correct. I just wanted to look inside. Page 377 from the Mittler Rebbe, that Ein Arech Lecha, that means that the divine, even as it is in existence, remains removed and therefore not subject to change. Okay, which, as I explained, the main emphasis of that is that it retains the so-called the pristine, the purity of divine immutability. Is that the word when you say something that doesn't have any, is not impacted? Or we say omnipotence? One of those words. So we have that divine remains in that context. However, and here comes the parentheses. What about Avodah Adam? When we do Avodah, we know it's affecting. One way or another, we said it has effects. The negative way, it causes a pagam, a wound, an injury above. And the positive way, it causes nachas, pleasure. Because the divine manifests into the structure of existence, kamada Adam, and like we learned before about Malchus being like the potter's wheel, that spins and turns and is the place that has impacted, that when you're shaping the wheel, the potter's wheel is taking the clay and shaping it, so there is impact. And when a person does Maisa Tachtenim in general, he said, not only affects Malchus, but also the 10 spheres of Atzilus, and also the Oiris and the energies, which manifest Bislapshus, Pnimius Teda Mitzvahs, which touches Pnimius Hussein Yisbarach. That's why that when we do mitzvahs, we increase energy above as well. So it does have an impact. So he says that's not about creation. That's already, excuse me, that's Avodah. So he makes a distinction between the creation process and Avodah. So I wanted to spend a few minutes explaining that, because the question could be asked, what difference does it make? If God is beyond existence, because he's simply a different reality, so both in creation process and Avodah should be equally not have an impact on him. It's only for us, or only on lower levels of the divine. Like he said, as the divine manifests in the Kelim of Asiyah, in Islapshus, ultimately the Ha'ara of Ha'ara, there may be some impact, but not in the higher levels. So why, when it comes to Avodah, is it different? So this brings us back to a discussion that goes back to the middle, the Maimer Vayikra and Sav, Tofresh Ayin Hey, in the middle of volume 2. So I want to sum up and explain. I think it's a very, very important piece in the whole puzzle. So briefly, God on his own is no question is beyond everything in existence and does not need it and is not impacted by it. When we say he desired to have a dira b'tachtenim, we'll talk about that. That is a special thing that God desired. But if you talk about the very personality, quote unquote, of the divine, like we said, it's not like the philosophers think, yesh mi yesh. There's nothing in common between the creator and the creation. It's not like an architect, it's not like an artist, it's not like a composer, it's not like an author. There's nothing in common. And even the very word why he created, the very word why, seichel, is also created by God. So even an intelligent person asking why is only once intelligence is created. God didn't need to create intelligence either. And yet he did. We know that he did. We'll talk about that some more soon. But the very fact that God creates in this manner is important for us to know that there's nothing in common. Why is that important? Because we need to know life does not begin with you. It's not me, the center of the universe. The yesod, the foundation of all life, of love, of relationships, of commitment, of responsibilities, that's not all about me. Just imagine for a moment. I mean, you don't have to imagine much. You see it all the time. But imagine every person on earth was complete narcissist, complete, absolute, selfish, survival of the fittest, selfish gene. That's his identity. What would we have? A world of destruction, because there'd be the conflicts, my interest and your interest, and ultimately we destroy each other. And that's what we see so often has happened. The good news is that we are intelligent enough to impose at least certain checks and balances, red lights, green lights, rules, boundaries. So self-interest, in the words of Adam Smith, capitalism works because this self-interest is also important for us to coexist. And we need each other. And cooperation and collaboration actually enriches your self-interest as well. It works, but it doesn't work completely. That's why you need courts of law and you have litigation, etc. But we know how close we are at the edge and how often in history we've come to the edge of almost total annihilation. The Mabul is an example. The world was filled with crime, selfishness. World War II is another example. So the very concept of Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, as the Rebbe explains, you can't have loish sirsach. Do not murder. and leisignav, they're not steal, and leisinav, they're not violate the boundaries, sexual boundaries, etc. All that falls apart if you don't have a God. Because why shouldn't I do whatever I like? And I'll justify it. I'll find a reason, explanation. So the very foundation of morality, of us being to be, is understanding we answer to something greater than. Ayin royev is a shamas. Is an eye that sees and the ear that hears, and we're accountable. If we make God like one of us, maybe a little more superior because he's God, we undermine the whole purpose of a God, which is that we answer to something that is of a different reality. So the first thing we need to know is the process of hisavos, creation. You're not some equal, commensurate entity with God. If you have any relationship with God, it's because God wants you to have a relationship, not because you deserve it on your own, because you are, because you value yourself. So that's the track of creation. That's what we've been talking about here. That's yesh mi ayin. It's not yesh mi yesh. It's nothing commensurate. It's a quantum leap, and we need to know that. And God is not affected by us because all of it is coming from a reflection. So don't try to fit God into your box. You have to fit into his box. In the words that I often use is that the part has to come to appreciate it's part of a whole. The whole doesn't have to fit in, whole meaning W-H-O-L-E. The entirety of reality doesn't fit into our little box. We are part of a bigger reality. That's hisavos. But then comes something else. Why did God do this? I'm saying why, I don't mean necessarily an intelligent reason, but there's a purpose to it all. Because God shows, despite the fact that I am completely, infinitely distant from you, and everything in existence does not impact me. Atuhu, actualize nivra elam, atu misha nivra elam. God's eternity is not compromised in any way. What is the word when you say something is like a never changing? It's not immutable, right? What's the word? Anybody knows the word in English? Something never changes. There's a word for it. It's not eternal, not immortal.
It's immutable.
Immutable.
It is immutable. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So the idea that there's a nitzchias, that there are things like as I read a few days ago, I read a secular guru or a master said, someone asked him, what's reality? He said, reality is that which never changes. Interesting. Anything that changes doesn't mean it's an illusion, but as soon as it changes, it means it's somewhat, what's the word I want to use? It's not fickle, it's mercurial. It's mercurial. An atzmi doesn't change. Emes doesn't change. This is it. This is emes lamite. If it's, if someone says, I love you, and then a little while later, they say, I hate you, or they take you to court, or, is that real love? Yeah, for the moment, there was a crush. There was something there. Let's say it was even real for the moment. But if it doesn't last, that's why Torah says, Chaim, Mayim Chaim, what means living waters. Emes is something that's enduring, that's immutable. So, okay, that's one thing. But then God said, in my infinite distance from you, when I say distance, I mean nothing commensurate, I chose to have a relationship with you. So an atzmus mamish, that is completely, not only malchus, that goes into existence. We'll talk about that briefly in a moment. I'll talk about that in a moment, meaning briefly, soon. That even in my completely beyond, and that's what he says in the Maimer Vayikra and Sav, Tofresh Ayin Hey, in the middle of the second volume, that God chooses in the place where nothing makes a difference to him, I want it to make a difference. I want your Avodah. Why? Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's a Nesava. The Alter Rebbe says, Atayv Nishtak in Kasha. There's no question, because this is before there were questions, before there's Seichel. It's something in the etzem of the Eibishter that is what he desires. The only word we can use is taiva. And even that's not adequate. It's just a word to tell us that when someone says it's a taiva means I have no explanation. But it's not really even the right word either. You can't say taiva on Eibishter either. But Beloshim B'nei Adam, for our vernacular, for our ability to at least talk about it, so it gives us some words. But we right away qualify the word is also not adequate, but it gives us some sense You know, I deeply desire to hug my child. Someone say, why do you have a desire to hug your child? You say, he's my child. He's a part of me. You don't have no real explanation. It's how it is. That's reality. Explanations are usually there when you need to explain it. Without the explanation, it wouldn't make sense. But an atzmi doesn't need explanations. I don't want to elaborate on that, but that's the key. So the etzem of the etzem, desire to have a dira b'tachtenim, desire to have neshamas. He wants the neshamas to have a piece of himself. Chelik elikam mal mamish. This is all another track. This is not the track of creation. This is the track of the purpose of creation. This is where the divine, we're understanding what is lying behind it all. The creation process itself, God's immutability and Leishanisi reigns supreme, all the way through Ishtalshal. So we need to know that. We need to know, God, you are not God, period. I think it was one of the Twerskis from the Chernobyl family, Chernobyl dynasty, that said, Moida ani lefanecha. What is Moida ani lefanecha? Moida ani, Moida, I acknowledge that ani is not lefanecha, that I am not you. You are the God. I am acknowledging you, that you are not. Ani is not lefanecha. That's the way he touched the. Okay, getting back to the point. But then there's the purpose of creation, and the purpose God infused and said, I want my etzem. And I want to have a desire. I desire to have a dira b'tachtenim. I'm sending a neshama that's coming from the highest places, that's carrying my instructions. You're my agent, he says to the soul, and go down to this world. Mashbir ne'seiti tzadik v'alti rasha, and you're going to enter into a body and into an animal soul, and you're going to have battles, and it's going to be shcheirani. It's going to be dark and difficult, but you have my power. You're my child. Bonim atem l'Hashem Elokecha. You have a piece of me. All that is not necessarily a creation. When God created the world, he creates, an architect creates a building. He doesn't have to infuse himself in the building if he doesn't want to. He's building a building for a client. But in this case, it's not the case. It's not for a client. This is for his neshamas, for his children. And Hashem chose that. So another track enters into existence, which is the purpose of existence. And here, there is, he doesn't use the word shinei spilas, but it's negeya ma'aseh tachtenim. And we're dafka in the deepest levels of pnimius. He says clearly, pnimius harotzen, pnimius ein sof, moel tshuva. That's where Moshe Rabbeinu reached on Yom Kippur. When the Jews built the golden calf, what do you think happened? Basically, what happened was that they undermined the relationships. Hashem essentially removed himself and said, what do you want from me? You betrayed me in the worst possible way. And Moshe said, but so you're now removed from us due to creation, because you're beyond existence. And we know that God does not have to be, he's not commensurate, he's not an equal to us. But Moshe was reaching a different track. He wanted to reach the Pnimius Atzmus of Ein Sof. Why did you create existence? You created them for a reason. The reason that they should make a Dira B'Tachtem. Yes, they sinned, and they need to do tshuva, and they need to amend, and they need to correct. But I want to reach your Pnimius and Atzmus. That's Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. Because I need that right now. That's where tshuva comes from. Without that, take away this reaching Pnimius Atzmus, like I just said, there's no difference to God. Creation doesn't make a difference one way or the other. But that's not purpose. That's creation. That's the actual creative process. It doesn't take, God does not get tired from creation, and he's not impacting him. But purpose is a whole different thing. That's the love that you have to the neshamas. And that is the pnimius. So there is a level in the makif, like he said, the chetzenius makif, v'chashecha ka'era. It's all equal. That's where Hashem, when Hashem says he's indifferent, it's like the makif, but it's not the makif pnimius makif. It's the chetzenius. So there's a level where God is detached. Then there's a level where God is connected, but the lowest levels of Elikuz that manifest in existence. I'll get to that in a moment. And then there's the Pnimius and Atzmus, and that's where he wants Avodah. Because he wants it, that's why it has impact. But it's not impact because it has to have impact, because at the end of the day, Atzmus is not creation. But he infused us and creation with a capacity to satisfy, to fulfill, to realize his ultimate purpose. So when Mashiach comes, it's not just that we will have pleasure. and nachas ruach. It'll also be nachas ruach beira. The Eibishter too will be in some way, we can't explain it entirely, fulfilled. Not because he was lacking, but because that's what he wants. Nesava, that's what he wants. The Rebbe explains this beautifully in the Sikha Vayigash, in volume 5, the Sikha is the second Sikha Vayigash, about how Mashiach affects Atzmus too. Okay. One more piece, however, before summing up this, and that is regarding what about the divine that we're talking about that does manifest in existence. So he's saying, even though he's been pushing and saying that even Malchus in Asiya, what he called Asiya, Malchus of Asiya, the Asis, the Tzerufe Asis that come down and create existence, even there's Leish Nisi, because it retains this divine nature. But he did say earlier that there is the aspect of the Ha'ara that due to this lapsus has some impact, even though now he's not saying it, but there it's coming from the diminished divine reality, meaning since it's so diminished, so it could have some impact. Even though that he did say that, similar when he said about the soul inside the body, that the soul, even though the soul be'etzem is not affected by the body and by energizing the body, but it does feel the pain and the pleasure of the experiences of the body, the lower level of the soul. But when it comes to Lakus, he says it's unlike that. But I still say that he did say on the end of the paragraph in 1468, that there is something that is impact. When you get the Kalim of Asiya, he says, Shayach Shiniv Ispilus, at the end of the middle paragraph on page 1471. But that is all because the Hisavus is such that the lower levels of the divine get diminished. That's not to be compared at all to the impact on a Lakus, especially in the deepest levels in Atzilus and higher than Atzilus, of Avodah Hashem. This is in the creative process that there's something that he's describing. I just wanted to fill out the whole picture here. So bottom line is there's two tracks. The creation track, and there the immutability of God remains completely intact, preserved its integrity. And then there's another, is the Avodah, that Hashem wants Avodah, and as a result of that, it's Negeya, Ma'aseh Tachtenim, in Malchus, and in the 10 spheres of Atzilus, and frankly, all the way, the higher levels, even higher levels, like he says, the Pnimius HaRotz and the Pnimius Ein Sof. Okay, just wanted this explanation, get it into the discussion. Okay. And if anybody wants to ask any questions, please feel free to do so. But I think it's pretty clear, frankly. Okay.
Yes, I'd like to say something. First of all, I looked up that statement by the Malachi that Ki Ani Hashem Lo Shnisi. It's interesting. It's the very last prophet in Tanakh that's quoted, and it's from there. And it says Ki Ani Hashem Lo Shnisi.
B'nai Yisrael lo echal lisam, right?
Right. But I tell you, lo klisam, and Rashi says, so too is your existence. The Radak says, your existence is also forever, guaranteed forever. There's eternity, and just like there's, in a sense, I didn't change. Yaakov will exist forever. But what's interesting here, I thought, is in this whole discussion, the very next pasuk is, Lameme avosechem sartem mechukai, v'lo shamartem shuvu alai. Do tshuva. From the days of your fathers, you turned from my Torah, and you didn't guard them. And then the Eibusher says to a prophet, return to me, do tshuva, v'ashuva aleichem, and I will return to you, says God. So this is the tshuva that you're saying does reach that tshuva that the Eibusher wants, that you were just talking about. That level, ani lo shnisi, but he then connects it to, if you return to me, do tshuva, and you'll turn, and I will return to you. Meaning that there is a relationship. If you do tshuva,
so could be talking exactly on Hashem L'Shanisi is the creation track, and the tshuva is the Avodah track.
Avodah track, right? It's amazing. That's right there.
Because remember, when we say that our Avodah impacts God, it's not a contradiction to God's immutability, God forbid. Two separate things. It's when God is building the building, he's not affected by it like a human being is affected when we throw a stone or we build something. That's the very nature of God. But then there's something else. There's something more beautiful. There's a personal God that shows that despite my immutability and despite all that, I want to have a relationship with you only because I want to, not because I need to, not because I'm dependent, not because we have something in common. It's a very important, it's a twist that is like counterintuitive in a way.
And my question to you then, the whole Ayin Beis is developing. One of the main things is how we have a relationship with God at the deepest levels. And my question to you is that when we do tshuva, this Avodah track, the Avodah track that you're talking about, are we reaching? We're reaching that level of Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi. Are we reaching? You just
may be
quoted that
reaching higher than that, frankly.
You said here we're reaching Panemius or Ein Sof. As you quoted there, I didn't see the pasuk. But Etzem is even higher than that. Or Panemius or Ein Sof. It's Etzem itself.
In a way, it's higher because Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi is more the very nature of God, so to speak. We are subject to change, and God's not subject to change. But remember, Atzmus is not bound by that either. He could decide that I want to engage with existence. So he doesn't say this explicitly, but I would even argue that it could be higher than Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi.
Wow.
Now, when I say higher, I don't mean that God suddenly is changing. I mean to say that Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi is so-called like the Oir Ein Sof, the divine immutability we talked about, or Atzmus even. I mean, that's a discussion. I can't answer that completely. Or you could also argue the other way around, that when we do Avodah, we bring the Lo Shanisi of God into our Shanisi of our lives. How about that? Right. In other words, when we sin, we disconnect, and we become subject to the mercurial and intemporariness of mortality. When we do a mitzvah, Atam Advekim, we connect to the very source of life that is immutable and unchangeable. That's another way of putting it. That tshuva and following God is actually brings eternity into the impermanent. We're basically fusing immortality into mortality, eternity into the limited, into the temporary, and
temporal,
the infinite in the finite.
I think the word you're looking for is temporal, Rabbi.
Maybe
temporal is a good word too. Yeah.
Also,
I said temporary.
Ephemeral.
Yeah.
Ephemeral.
Yeah.
Or ephemeral.
Ephemeral. Yeah, these are all. So I think that would probably be the better way to explain it. That Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi is God's domain. Our domain is Shinri. We're subject to change all the time. And when we do the Avodah, we really follow track number 2, Avodah, we bring the Lo Shanisi into our existence. And that's why Losid Lovi will be Chaim Nitzchim.
It would seem like that having a relationship with Ani Lo. Can you hear me? Because
I hear you. Yeah, of course.
It sounds like if we're going to have that level, only because God wants it, as you said, Ratzon, He wants it. If we were to have that relationship with the level of Etzem Mamish, Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi, that God, we can impact Him, and He's still not impactable. Meaning that since we're connecting with the Etzem is able to hold a paradox. Etzem is above logic. Paradoxical is the same as logic to Hashem, so to speak, to the Etzem, meaning that we can impact Him, and we have an ultimate relationship with God at the deepest Atzmas level, and He relates to us on that level because He wants to, and yet at the same time He doesn't change, which seems to be a paradox, because if we're having a relationship with Him, it would seem like He would be changing, as it says in the Malachi here, I will return to you, so there's some type of change there. But it would seem that since we're dealing with the Etzem, relating with the Etzem, God has both aspects together. I'm not changing, but I'm still related to you because the paradox, because the Etzem can hold a paradox.
Yep, that's good too. Yeah.
Wow.
There is a mimer of Alter Rebbe on the Kavanot of Shofar. It's actually at the end of a Machzor of Rosh Hashanah. And he actually talks about the very fact that by blowing the shofar, beyond speech, we are able to actually reach Atzmut itself, and the Tainug of Atzmut to convince Hashem to create the world again. A desire to create the world again. So we are capable through Avodah to reach Atzmut, the very Atzmut, nothing but Atzmut. That's the whole thing of shofar.
Could I comment on something, please, Rabbi? I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the class, but what I'm hearing and what I heard yesterday, it sort of sounds like it's a elastic kind of a thing that the channel opens more and closes more. Is that a good way to view the way the energy?
That's what he described earlier with the potter's wheel.
Yeah.
Yes, he explained that at length of how the effect works. That the effect works on the potter. But once you open the channel, higher energies flow down, even though you don't directly affect them. It's like when you open up, you said elastic is a good word, but when you open up a channel, the part that you affect is the door you open. But that which flows through, you're not affecting directly, but it's definitely being impacted because now it's flowing freely. It's like when when God forbid, they have to put a stent in a blocked artery or do something else to unblock it, and then the blood flows. So the effect is in the area where they're putting the stent in or they're unblocking. But then once the flow is also being affected, the person is coming alive. So that's how we explained it earlier, the exact dynamics of how Avodah affects even higher levels. But I went even further than that in this discussion here. But yeah, that's part of it. Yeah.
I will listen to the class. Thank you.
Okay, good. So we continue? Ready to continue? Okay. Yeah, this is very fundamental. If you want to mark it, this class is definitely a fundamental theme that is very important to keep in mind in the scheme of things. Okay. Now, Rebbe Rashab is going back to something he began on top of page 1467. And that is the fundamental nature of existence of being Yesh Ma'ayin, not Yesh Miyesh, which we just discussed. That it's critical to understand that existence is not incommensurate with and not proportionate to and does not have anything in common with the ayin. That's what Yesh Ma'ayin really means. It doesn't just mean ex nihilo, that it came from nothing. It means existence and its source are not on the same level playing field. Two realities, which is what gives God significance. Because if God was just another form of our Yesh, just the earlier stage of it, if, for example, someone said, you know what God is? The Big Bang, that's God. The ball of gas, where it all began, that's God. So we all know what that means. That just carries over the question, like Avraham Avinu came to realize that it's still part of the Yesh. It's just a long time ago, and it's just the earlier stages. So to say that, or the example, the joke from Chelem, where the guy said, so how does the train work? How does an engine work? How does a train work? He says, well, the second car is pushing the first car because they didn't see a horse pulling the cars. So the second car is pushing the first car. And who's pushing the second car? The third car, the fourth car, the fifth car. And who's pushing the last car? I forgot to ask, or I didn't see. So you're just carrying over the question. Yesh Miyesh still leaves out essential component. When you bring in Yesh Ma'ayin, you're saying the divine is a completely different reality. And that's what you're subject to. That's what you answer to. That's where there's accountability and so on. As I said before, the value of God is completely unlimited. You could say undermined and completely unnecessary if God is just another one of us, if he's just the first cause, in the words of Aristotle. So he's the first cause. So you have parents, your parents had parents, they had parents, and it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve, and they had God. He's just another parent, so to speak, the first cause. But here we're saying Yesh Ma'ayin, so it changes that the ayin is immutable, as we said, unchangeable, and is not affected and impacted, and it's nothing incommensurate, nothing in common with it between the Yesh and the ayin. That's where this whole discussion began on top of 1463. In the Rebbe, 14, what did I just say? No, sorry, 1467. 1467. The Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe's Mimer, that was page 374. Now he's going now to the concluding that theme, and now he's quoting from the Mittler Rebbe's Mimer, page 380. So the Mittler Rebbe took around 6 pages, and there's actually interesting things in the Mittler Rebbe's Mimer that the Rebbe Rashab chose not to cite in understanding this process of creation. maybe when we learn it in the Mittler Rebbe, we'll learn that as well. It definitely helps understand, and it's interesting to try to analyze why the Rebbe Rashab chose not to include that in the discussion of the relationship between the divine energy and the creation that it creates, the creative divine creative energy and the creation it creates. But right now we're learning it in Ayin Beis. I'm just pointing out that there are more material, a few pages in Mittler Rebbe that the Rebbe Rashab does not really quote. At first I thought he may allude to it, but I see this parts he really left out. I mean, the most likely reason is because it's not necessary for the full explanation, and it could also even complicate matters once you start going into it, but it's still important to note. So now he goes back, Yuvan, 4 lines from the bottom of page 1471. So now we're going back, as I said, to the themes of page 1467, where it began this discussion about the philosophers and their mistake of seeing existence as yesh mi yesh, one entity, cause and effect, that have something in common between the creator and the creation, and the truth that it's not that way. So he's now going back to that. And with all of this is understood, that creation is yesh ma'ayin, meaning a paradigm shift, a quantum leap from a state of ayin here, meaning nothingness. From our perspective, we don't see anything in common. When you see, for example, you cut off a piece of bread from a loaf from a challah, you see there's the challah and there's the piece. When you pour water from a pitcher, you see there's the water and then yesh mi yesh. Everything is yesh mi yesh. You take certain substances, certain elements, you manipulate them, you reshape them. It's yesh mi yesh. Yesh mi ayin, 2 separate realities. It's a mysterious entity, ayin. The yesh does not see behind the curtain, so to speak. So he says, so all this will understand the difference. The Isavis is mi yesh and not yesh mi yesh kitos ha-philosophim, like the mistake of the philosophers, which he referred to, as I said before, on the top of page 1467. The mistake of the philosophers, and again, this is the Mittler Rebbe's language. The Meshum Zeh, because they made this mistake, where they saw it yesh mi yesh, huksha lahem inyan hashinei v'yispilus. That's why they have that's why they wonder, and they are puzzled by, and they can't understand it. Huksha lahem. It's difficult for them to understand the concept of shinei and ispilus. Since creation is yesh mi yesh, it should have an impact on the yesh. The effect should have an impact on the cause. Just like when I throw a stone, or when I build a house, or when I take something and I reshape it, it has an effect. One has an effect on the other. Why is there that question? Why do they have that challenge, the difficulty? Because they made a mistake. They think it's yesh mi yesh. V'gam, according to them, their mistaken perspective, tzarich is b'bchinas ishtavus. There has to be something incommensurate and common between the two. All this he elaborated on page 1467. In other words, if he say yesh mi yesh, there are 2 things. One is that it should have an effect, an impact, a change, and a shinin ispilus, a change and an impact. And 2, that there should be something in common. That's according to their mistaken perspective. But being that's wrong, it's yesh ma'ayin that changes. That yesh ma'ayin explains it all. The eina emes came, because that's not true with their opinion. Ki'im, rather, what is true? Sheklolos hishtalshelus v'isavos, that the general cosmic order and the general isavos creation, kuma'ayin, it's not from a yesh, it's from a completely different reality. It's from a reflection. Ayin is also reflection, but also something of a different reality that does not subject to change. It's not coming from Atzmus directly. It's only a reflection, and a reflection does not impact Atzmus. And reflection is Shalei Berech to Atzmus, and also the existence doesn't affect the Ur, as we learned. So it's it's only a reflection, like the sunlight does not affect the sun, and the sunlight is not affected by shining down to earth. Valkain, and therefore, next page, 1472. In the Atzmus, in the core, It's not possible, the concept of at all, absolutely unequivocally not possible to apply the concept of change at all. And here he clearly says it. Like we said, completely infinitely distant. Again, klal is big. Klal is unequivocally beyond everything. Like we say, Ata Kodesh, that you are Kodesh. You are holy, but Kodesh means muvdo. Shekodesh umuvdo legamri. You are, the word Kedusha means from the word separate. You are separate and completely apart. This is HaMelech HaKodesh. When we say, actually Rosh Hashanah, the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, we say HaMelech HaKodesh. So we say, HaMelech HaKodesh, Shekodesh umuvdo be'etzem. That he's Kodesh. Is from the word muvdal, completely removed be'etzem, fundamentally, not just technically. It's not just removed that right now he's beyond us. Fundamentally a different reality. Nothing in common. Again, in the creation track, we're not talking about the Avodah track where God wants the relationship. And this is what it says. Rabbeis asisa ato Hashem Elikai. That you, God, have done many things. Rabbi Sasisa, you've done much. The Hisavasi be'emes b'chinas atzmus ein sof. That the Hisavas is truthfully coming from atzmus ein sof. He said before, it comes through a reflection. But who's the power of creation is atzmus ein sof, or commission is bar liel. Or b'chol zeh ein arech elecha. And nevertheless, at the same time, like we learned, the paradox, it's einarech, it's completely distant, apart. Einarech, completely infinitely apart. Because everything that which was created, all of Ishtalshus, all the cosmic order and all the worlds and all the dimensions were created, which is your wonders and your thoughts. So it's coming from the power of Atzmus, but it's coming just like sunlight comes from the sun. But it's all coming from only a reflection, and a reflection is not in any way negeya. Doesn't touch it, doesn't affect in any way Atzmus. But as we learned, it goes even further. Not just Atzmus, there's no shinui. Gam b'ha'ara ein shum shinui. Also on the reflection, there's no change. The light of the sun is also not changed. The same thing with the light of the divine, as we said, Malchus, even when it comes into Asiyah, is also not changed. Not only the Eid as it's encompassed in the core, which is not yet considered a source for the Yesh. That for sure is beyond and change. Even the divine reflection that becomes a mocker, which means it's manifesting and applying itself and engaging with existence, like we said. That too is not subject to any change at all. Because that too remains enarech, because it's part of the divine force, even as it manifests within existence. Now that's the true meaning of Yesh Ma'ayin, which frankly is really very valuable because many people talk Yesh Ma'ayin, and sometimes you wonder, why is it so important to say Yesh Ma'ayin? Yes, we understand that the world was created, it didn't create itself. It has a creator. But here you see it's a lot deeper than just as a creator. It's coming to emphasize that the creator and the creation are nothing in common, so we have to be completely bottled to the creator. It's not like our older brother. It's not like a friend. Again, we're not talking about the Avodah God chooses. We're talking about the very nature of existence. And it's like if you have Ayin Beis, an eye that sees and an ear that hears, and then you find out that the supervisor is just one of you, obviously what kind of real accountability is there going to be if God is just a superior version of a human being? Yeah, it's higher level. And yes, so you answer to your superior. But when you know that it's Yesh Ma'ayin, it's a whole different story. And above all that, it also brings into our existence the immutability and the Loishanisi, this eternity and immortality of the divine. So the infinite comes into the finite here. Yeah, okay. So we'll stop here at the end of this paragraph. Any questions?
Yes, I'm having trouble understanding why you translate ayin as an aura. I think it diminishes ayin by saying it's an aura. I mean, it seems to diminish the process. Maybe I'm getting it wrong.
Why does it diminish it? I mean, it's telling us that all of existence is coming from only a reflection of the divine, not the divine essence itself. So it just emphasizes the infinite distance.
Oh, okay. So if you look at it as even it's not even coming from his right hand, but from his left hand, so to speak.
Like when you say, let's say Yesh Amiti.
Yeah, but he didn't make it from an aura. He still came from like ayin, nothing at the same time. Okay.
No, there's another meaning in ayin, that it's nothing in our world. It's not a reality. It's like a scientist will say, I can only talk to you about the Big Bang. I can't talk to you about something that I have no
I feel
clue
better
what it is.
now. Thank you.
Yeah. A second point I want to just add, when we say, we learned at the end of volume 2, Yesh Amiti, God Atzmus is called Yesh, not Ayin. That's Yesh Amiti. So when you say the Yesh created the Yesh, we don't want to make a mistake to think that they're in common. There's nothing in common. That's why you say the Yesh reflected through an ayin, ha'ara, and that ha'ara in turn engages and creates. So that just creates a certain quantum leap, a distance between the source and us. It really is coming to explain how different we are from God. Like when atheists say, you say nothing can create itself. So who created God? That's always the question you have from them. And you say to them, no, if you understood what God was, you'd never ask that question. The question of something created, nothing can create itself, is only a yesh. If your atzmus is not subject to those rules, that its whole reality is not based on creation and not creation. It's a reality because it's real, and therefore that whole thing is mitziusim atzmuse. Just another few points in this discussion. Okay, just to set the stage for the next section. So he's going to now bring this all back to Yechudei Law and Yechud
I left a
Tata.
message late at night. I want to make
Hello?
Eliezer, can you mute? Eliezer,
I'm not-
can you mute?
sure.
The next part, and I'm just laying the ground for this because tomorrow I'm traveling, so I don't think there'll be a class tomorrow. Let me just look. What time am I going?
We shouldn't have a class tomorrow. Everybody's with the door.
No. We can't. Tomorrow can't be right. No, there's no class tomorrow. So being that this is the last class before Rosh Hashanah, so the next section is going to be about going back to the bottom of page 1466, where Yechudei Law, Yechud Tata.
Hello? I'm sorry, what? Hello?
Rav Shlomo.
So the Rebbe Rashab is going to go back to the bottom of 1466, the difference in Yechudei Law, Yechud Tata, Shema and Baruch Shem, Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Echad. So this is very good material for Rosh Hashanah davening, frankly, because Rosh Hashanah is when the world goes back to its source and the creation process, everything we're learning here, and the purpose of creation, the Avodah, So all this really comes together in a very beautiful way. But that's what he's going to go to next, which is continuing what the Mittler Rebbe does, as it discusses. But as I said, there's going to be a point in Ayin Beis, which is going to be clearly where the Rebbe Rashab is going to end, and we'll have to go to the Mittler Rebbe to see what the end of the story, the narrative is. Okay, so we're stopping here. End of paragraph 13.
Could I ask a question?
Just a second. So we're stopping here, the end of the paragraph on 1472. And as I said, this will set the tone to go into B'cholanal, the Beis Yechudim of Yechudei Law, Yechud Tata, and the plot thickens. It gets even more interesting and intriguing and intricate, I should add as well. Okay, so I'll stop here. Well, yeah, any questions?
Yeah, my question is that the ha'ora, we learned earlier that the ha'ora doesn't create positions. I thought that it's a ha'ora sheba ha'ora. It's a one step removed from ha'ara. It says clearly what we just learned now. Ha'ara is not
You
a
can't have ha'ara of ha'ara if you don't have a ha'ara, right?
right. But
so you need all the levels. God created all these levels. There's etzem, that's the creator. Then there's Ein Sof, that's kol be'etzem, like he calls it. And then there's the that keeps on traveling. That's the whole. I mean, you have also ha'ara, the ha'ara. I mean, there's infinite levels. What? I'm not sure what your question is.
No, but we learned that I think when Tzvi asked ha'ara, how as Ain or Yesh Ma'ayin, it's coming from
Because he's not going through the details right now. He's just saying what he began with, that the first thing is that the etzem, there's no shinui. There's no shinui in the ha'ara. The truth is, at the end, he said that even malchus that comes into asiya, there's also no change. And then, so you're asking why he doesn't mention ha'ara, the ha'ara here?
No, is there a change in the ha'ara, the ha'ara? Is there also
I just discussed this in I thought half of the class I dedicated to that. I spoke about that. It appears from earlier that he said there's a change, but not mitzad the etzem, only mitzad the slapshus. That's the end of the paragraph 1468. At the end of 1460, the end of the paragraph of in the middle of the paragraph 1469, he said clearly that what did he say? What am I looking for? I'm sorry. At the bottom of 1471, he said in Malchus, in Kalim of Asiya, there is a shinui in Espilus. So I would say there's an aspect of the ha'ara that does not change. That's Malchus, even as it comes down below. But apparently there is a level, ultimately, there is some effect on a lower level of Elikus as it comes into the Kalim of Asiya. That's pretty clear at the end of paragraph 1471. And I discussed the different aspects of this. It's not about Avodah here. We're talking about creation.
Wow.
I had a quick question before class ends about something you said toward the very end of your explanation of the part that we read today, which was that because Atmos is fundamentally has a fundamentally different nature than our existence and is infinitely apart, and that we come from this source that is so different than us. Therefore, you said we have to be bottled to it. So that I lost you there because I understand from an Avodah perspective that in order to be my true self, I have to channel the energy from which I was created. But let's say a king builds a huge kingdom, right? And I'm born, 2,000 generations later, and I'm living in this kingdom. Right. I don't know anything about the king. The king is so far away, and maybe he's not even in that kingdom. He's halfway around the world. He happened to have built this kingdom. It's not even there. So, I mean, what is it about that distance, that yesh me'ayin, me'yesh, if you will, that implies bittul? I can understand how if I really want to get in touch with what this world is made out of, and if I want to get in touch with my true self.
The answer is very straightforward. As I brought Anochi Hashem Elokecha is necessary for an absolute, unequivocal negating of the possibility to murder others. The Nazis thought that they were supermen. Either they thought they were God, or they thought they were closer to God than others. And as soon as you and God become entangled, and there's a yesh me-yesh aspect, there's something commensurate, then you can play God. And you could decide, what you want. But as soon as you know that there's nothing in common between you and God created you, and there's a complete yesh ma'ayin, there's absolute authority. Only God can say what is right and what is wrong. There's nothing in common. There's nothing we cannot, like we learned earlier about, if you remember, about Chochmah Shemen of the Nefesh Habamis, the oil of Chochmah Klippus Nega, that even though there is the aspect of an animal soul's wisdom dealing with its own survival and its own selfish needs, but he said even science and mathematics is still dissecting an existence. So it's your wisdom is all about existence. It's yesh mi-yesh. And at the end of the day, you're not relating to something that's beyond you, you're relating to an extension of yourself. If it's an extension of yourself, even if you're a moral person, you're already on a very dangerous road, because at the end of the day, today, You may do moral things. Tomorrow, the self decides, I don't want to be so, I have other rules. There's no total absolute bittul when it's yesh and not yesh ma'ayin. Because, well, on the other hand, when you know there's an immutable, absolute, unchangeable, and divine creator that's creating you every second, and that is where it all comes from. There is that sense of, say, awe, respect, whatever the word you want to use, but basically an absoluteness to God that you have no partnership with. You have no say there because there's nothing in common between you and him.
I see.
You know,
I see. Yeah.
I
That's
experienced
how I
that.
explained it.
I experienced that the first time I ever saw the Rebbe.
Okay, good.
In life, and that bittul, that caused it, impacted a bittul in me. You know, if I want truth, I've been seeking truth the whole time, and I see somebody who is an embodiment of a truth that's higher than anything I've ever seen and way above Yitzhak. When I saw that, I said, wow, I got to just attach myself to this and accept it.
Because look, at the end of the day, the hardest thing for life in life is to give up on your own ego and give up on your own self-interest. You want, what's in it for me? At the end of the day is what most people will ask. Well, they say it in words, or they don't say it in words. The idea of completely, it's not about me, it's about the ayin or the etzem, however you define it, changes the whole picture in that sense. I just want to add, I'm explaining that this way. I'm not saying at all the Rebbe Rashab said explicitly what I said, but in reading it, to me, it's apparent that's really what's the mistake of the philosophers. Who really cares if it's yesh miyesh or yesh ma'ayin? Well, who cares if there's a change or no change? It's not just, to me, it's not just a philosophical concept that God is immutable, it's not changeable. There's something deeper here going on, because you want to have it's clearly about connecting to something that is so beyond. Look, God could have created the world very differently. It could be yesh ma'ayin, but he would only allow us to access yesh miyesh. You can access me, the divine energy, and your little playground, and play around with it the rest of your life, and you'll feel very good. You never have to get out of your comfort zone. Yes, sometimes you have to climb a little higher, but nothing. There's no yesh and ayin leap that you need to count for. He could have done it that way, but that would leave us in a very. Then we'd be like essentially insects. That's how they live their world, and it's perfectly fine. Their job is to live up and fulfill a certain function and role in nature and so on. But there's that's already a further discussion about the two tracks as well, the track of creation and the track of purpose. I don't want to go there right now, because I think the next things we're going to learn, we're going to start seeing how these come together. The Yichud Elah, Yichud Tata. Is there only God, or is there an existence that's driven by God? So I want to see where this goes. It's really quite intriguing how he's going to explain the next section, these two levels of bittul. So
that was very helpful. Eliezer, that mashal was helpful. I think what we're saying is, if you want to live a moral life, and if you care about truth, then you must be batul.
Oh, if you don't, right, then frankly, you don't even need yesh miyesh. You're just a yesh. I'm self-made. I don't care about anything.
Yeah. So I understand the issue when you say that this way. You can't connect with truth, the ultimate truth, which is the immutable. This is the etzem, which is immutable. That's the only truth. This is etzem. That's the only truth. It's atmos. You can't connect with. You don't even stand a chance with it that way unless you're batul. And if you want to connect with what is truly moral, it can't be rules created by the Yesh. It has to be some morality that is fundamental to the very construct of the universe, which is
I'll go even a step further. In very psychological terms, as long as your morality, as long as your choices are made by you and your comfort zone, it's really not absolute. It's very arbitrary and very subjective. Because what today is comfortable for you, you do, and tomorrow it can change. It's the ayin that creates the no change. Actually, the idea that I'll quote the founding fathers, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, and that basically nobody can ever change them, because they were given to us, that all men are created equal, and that we have absolute rights endowed to us by our Creator. I think they are basically saying the Creator is Leishanisi, and these rules are Leishanisi, and they needed to establish that. Take that away from the Declaration of Independence, you tell me what happens to the Constitution.
Well said. Beautiful.
Because
That's the problem with our country today. And
yeah,
everybody.
because take that away, and I say no, we're not all equal. Some are more equal than others. You
Make
know,
whatever
Jews
rules you
are a
want.
minority, or I mean, and I think to contrast that with Yimach Shemam, the Nazis and their ideology, you have everything you need. I'm talking purely now in a very balbatische practical stuff. Huh?
No, I just said practical, like you said. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. Well said. Very helpful.
Because that always bothered me, to be honest. I always used to think, why is it so important, the Yesh Ma'ayin? So let's say the world exists forever. I'm not saying it makes sense because a finite thing can't be forever, but why do we have the insistence that it was Bereshis bara lekimus hashamayim v'saaretz? And from so when you start thinking, and then you start thinking about the Big Bang, and they don't, and no one can talk about what was there before because nobody knows what was there before. Who put the bullet gas? You start
Ayin
thinking
Beis.
about it, the philosophical implications of that are tremendous. It's a yesh mi yesh, yesh ma'ayin, two different paradigms and models of how to look at existence. It's not just a matter whether there's a God or not. It's a matter of how important are you? Who calls the shots? Let's put it this way.
What's my relevance? Yeah. What's my relevance?
Who's the boss?
Yeah.
I remember our mashpir Abiel said. He said Kabbalah Sale. He said it before Rosh Hashanah. He told us Kabbalah Sale, which is Kabbalah Sale Malchus Shamayim. Accepting God as our authority, which also always bothered because I never related to the concept of a king. Tamlichuni Aleichem, we're crowning God as king. So he said something interesting. He says many people think Kabbalah Sale means you're all fakvetched, you're all like, you feel like you're nobody and you're like worthless and you're just you're completely nullified in the presence of the divine. He says, no, it's simply saying, who's the boss? Who's the boss? Who's the Bala boss? Is it you? Is it your interests? Is it somebody else that you worship? Another person? Your hero? Who is the ultimate boss? I thought it was a very
wow. He made it
powerful.
something very complex, very simple, which is that's what a beautiful, brilliant
But
chassid does.
how awesome is it? Like when you think about that, Rabbi, how awesome is it that Hashem gives us a chance to connect to that, whatever we can't really conceive of.
Yeah,
but
I mean, this is the essence of Rosh Hashanah, to be honest. It's on one hand, us completely, I guess the word is, what's the word I want to say, surrendering to this higher authority and saying to God, we want a relationship with you, we want to renew it, and we want to draw it down into existence and create a new world and a new reality. Yeah.
Beautiful. Wonderful. What a wonderful way to end the class before Yontif. Thank you so much. Good Gebench Yard, everybody.
Good Gebench Year, Ksivach Simateva to everyone. To be a very blessed year, a healthy year, materially and spiritually, an abundance,
Amen. Amen. Amen.
good health. And we should continue our journey, this historic, epic journey of Yefutza Meinasechel Chutzah. And the Baal Shem Tov heard from Mashiach on Rosh Hashanah, by the way. When he asked him on Rosh Hashanah, when is Mashiach going to come? He said, when you will spread when your well springs will spread outward. So
amazing. Thank you, Rabbi, and the same to everybody.
So we shall resume.
Jacobs has a
One second, we shall resume. Let me just say, we'll resume Tuesday morning because Monday I'm still traveling. Go ahead. So we're stopping here. Let me just stop the recording.
Can you
We're
mute
stopping at
Mr.
the top
Rosenberg?
paragraph, page 1472. Go ahead. Anybody wants to say anything?
Can you mute Mr. Rosenberg?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was unmuted. I apologize.
She was in high school. After that,
A lot of people are muted. Moshe Belzer.
something like that.
There's some noise.
Okay. Someone wants to say something great. If not,